He lay still, eyes closed, breath shallow, as the scribes prepared their pens. And then, from the silence, words emerged. Words not his, yet spoken through him. He spoke of Atlantis rising again, of health remedies unknown to medicine, of souls who walked in ancient lands, and once, with uncanny precision, he predicted the stock market crash of 1929, 5 years before it shattered the world. This man was not a mystic cloaked in mystery. He was a humble photographer from Kentucky. But when Edgar Cayce entered trance, something extraordinary happened. He tapped into a vast ocean of memory and truth, a dimension Carl Jung would later call the collective unconscious. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, is one of the most enigmatic figures in spiritual history. Not because he performed miracles or saw visions, but because he consistently accessed a source of knowing beyond space, beyond time, beyond ego. He became a bridge between the individual and the infinite, the conscious and the cosmic. The collective unconscious is not imagination, it is not fantasy. It is the sacred library of the soul, a living archive of archetypes, symbols, and ancestral memory shared by all of humanity. It is where the myths are born and the patterns of existence are etched. It is where the soul remembers what the mind forgets. But how do you access something so vast, so veiled? This is the paradox. The collective unconscious is always present, yet rarely entered. Most live entire lifetimes at the surface of consciousness, distracted by noise, fragmented by fear, conditioned by a world that reveres intellect and dismisses intuition. To reach the deeper waters, one must surrender the surface, and that is what Edgar Cayce did. Not once, but over 14,000 times. He would lie down, clasp his hands over his chest, and allow his breath to slow. Those around him would speak his name, and with a few phrases, "We have the body," he would descend, not asleep, not awake. Somewhere in between, the borderlands of the soul. From that state, Cayce would speak, of past lives, future events, forgotten truths, remedies that modern science would only later validate. But more than his predictions, it was the source that intrigued scholars and mystics alike. Where did this information come from? Cayce never claimed it as his own. He often said he was tapping into a universal mind, an eternal consciousness accessible to all. What Jung would call the collective unconscious, Cayce experienced firsthand as a sea of knowledge, where all souls are connected and where truth is not learned but remembered. He called this source the Akashic Records, a dimension where every thought, action, and intention is recorded like ripples on water. In this realm, time is not linear but simultaneous. Past, present, and future are one. And it was from here that Cayce drew his insights. But unlike mystics who demanded belief, Cayce emphasized practice. He believed anyone could access this realm, not through superstition, but through attunement. He advocated for deep meditation, not escape, but embodiment. He urged people to keep dream journals, not for interpretation, but for integration. He taught that prayer was not begging, but aligning. That diet and breath influenced consciousness, that spiritual growth was not separate from physical discipline. His message was radical in its simplicity. The divine is within you. And to know yourself truly is to know the universe. Cayce's work is not a relic, it is a roadmap. Because today, the noise is louder, the distractions sharper. We scroll instead of dream. We consume instead of contemplate, and yet the longing persists, a quiet hunger for something beyond. Cayce reminds us that something is already inside you. To access the collective unconscious, you do not need to escape the world. You need to go inward, to become still, to unlearn what the world taught you about truth and return to the deeper knowing you were born with. He taught that dreams are not random. They are sacred letters from the soul. That symbols are not confusion, they are conversation, that synchronicities are not chance, they are callings, that each of us carries a spark of the eternal, and when we listen, truly listen, we hear not just our voice, but the voice of humanity, of divinity, of eternity. One of Cayce's most profound insights was this, that healing does not begin in the body, it begins in the soul. He described illness as a disruption in the spiritual blueprint. That disease is the echo of forgotten truth, and that by restoring harmony within, through forgiveness, through love, through conscious living, we restore health without. He described the soul not as something we have, but something we are. He spoke of reincarnation not as belief, but as memory. He said the purpose of life is not success, but remembrance. And above all, he reminded us that we are not separate, not from each other, not from the past, not from the future, not from the divine. The collective unconscious is not a distant realm. It is the breath between your thoughts, the silence beneath your name. It is the temple within. Edgar Cayce did not have special powers. He had special trust. Trust in the unseen, trust in surrender, trust in the still, small voice that speaks beneath the noise. And now that same voice calls to you to remember, to descend, to dream, to become a vessel for truth that transcends logic and time, because the collective unconscious is not a concept to understand. It is a mystery to embody. It is the source from which myths are born, visions rise, and humanity awakens. Edgar Cayce showed us the way, not as a guru, but as a mirror. He did not say, "Follow me." He said, "Know thyself." So what will you do with this remembrance? Will you keep sailing the surface, chasing answers, or will you dare to dive into the currents of the eternal, where your soul waits not to be fixed, but to be found? Let his journey be an invitation to trust your dreams, to listen to your intuition, to ask not what is true, but what is timelessly true. And then, perhaps like Cayce, you will find that the deepest wisdom is already within you, waiting, whispering, remembering.